We are 10 games through the 2025 season, and honestly, the Cowboys offseason moves have looked pretty good so far. We'll dive into them next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. It's your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool. And on today's show, we are going to be talking about the Cowboys offseason moves from 2025. I know we're only halfway through the season. We've kind of got this extra little bonus show before the Cowboys Monday Night Football game. So I thought we could take a look at all of the moves they made and some of the mistakes they made, and maybe how they can learn from it going forward. Because I think in general, Landon, it seems like this offseason was different than the way they've handled previous off seasons.
Yeah, and you know, we can debate whether it's the further infusing of the analytics department into decision-making process, or just kind of a change in overall philosophy, or maybe, you know, in their minds they're just doing what's smart for this year and it's not a change of philosophy or anything. Who knows? But the truth of the matter is that they made a lot of moves that we kind of felt like at the time were kind of regular Cowboys business that ended up being much better than we expected. Some obviously were terrible and they have been very publicized, but I think, you know, looking back retroactively, some of the smaller moves that they made in the offseason ended up being, you know, really good moves. And I think the things that they've done differently this offseason, could they be a template for how they operate moving forward? That's going to be the kind of key question.
All right, so let's go through some of the moves. I want to start in free agency. Their biggest free agent signing, and honestly the biggest one they've made in the last 10 years, like in terms of money per year, was actually signing Dante Fowler, who, and I know Dante Fowler is not Micah Parsons, but he's having a really good year by any metric. It's not like a 10-sack season or anything like that, so it's kind of going a little bit unnoticed, but bringing back Fowler was a great move for Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I think you have to understand like what his role was, and his role was to kind of come in and be a second or third pass rusher that, you know, is basically exclusively acting like that. And then suddenly the Micah Parsons situation happened, and it changed all the angles for him, right? And now suddenly he's being relied upon to kind of do a little bit more, to play a little bit more, to serve a little bit more of a kind of balanced defensive end role. And to his credit, I think he did a pretty decent job at that, you know, role, while having it kind of unexpectedly thrust upon him. So yeah, I agree. Like you get him back. He added something to your pass rush. And at times he was one of the only things that was positive about your pass rush. So it ended up being a very positive move. And considering what they paid for him, it honestly wasn't that much money.
And I know everybody's going to look at his stats, 2 sacks, and be like, okay, hey, Marcus, it's not that big of a deal. Every other advanced number, whether it's ESPN's win rate, Pro Football Focus's grades, or their pass rush win rate, all of the metrics are really good. It's kind of not his fault he's not getting sacks. It's because the corners have been awful. But another move that I want to talk about is the Rico Dowdle, Javonte Williams. Now, could the Cowboys have brought back Rico Dowdle at about the same price and maybe been slightly better? It's possible. Rico's having an outstanding year in Carolina, but Javonte Williams is as good as you could have ever hoped for with the Cowboys. He's been a great pass blocker. He's been one of the league's most efficient running backs. And I think this idea that you have to spend big money at the running back position to get elite production, it feels like the Cowboys are finally going away from that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, we talked about this. Could this be the influence of the analytics department kind of weaving its way in? I don't think I understand how good a season it seems like Rico Dowdle is having right now, and it's, you know, writ large, I think you could say that he's been very successful free agent signing for the Panthers.
Yeah.
But I think that I still think that you look at what the Cowboys have done and how their running game has been and how efficient they've been with Williams. I think it was a positive overall trade. I think you ended up getting a guy who maybe is a little bit more balanced of a game. I think in Williams, but I think it's
better
also
pass blocker for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it is one of those things where you look at it and you say, well, it could have been this, it could have been that, and maybe either way would have worked. But I think when you consider the money that you're getting, I think Williams is still a little bit younger than Dowdle is. I think you look at the situation and go, man, if you can get a Williams to come back maybe on a cheap deal because he likes the situation, then I think you could look at this as an overall positive situation for the Cowboys, even if Dowdle continues to have the success that he does.
Yeah, so those are two big moves. I also want to mention just briefly Solomon Thomas. No, he's not a starter, but he's been. I mean, the Cowboys have been searching for like this third defensive tackle forever, and he's been really good. So I at least wanted to mention him. The George Pickens trade, I want to save because we're going to get to the Pickens stuff in a little bit, and that's a more nuanced conversation. I wanted to go to the draft, Landon, because generally with draft picks, and we don't talk about this enough, you kind of know right away whether you have something or whether you don't. I mean, think about the Mozzie Smith pick. Like we were talking ourselves into it in year 2 and year 3, whereas like Tyler Booker and Donovan Ezeiruaku, we could debate positional value, but those guys have both been outstanding whenever they've been on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely times when you're not sure if a guy could develop, but I think if you usually know right away if you've got a good player, right?
Yeah, we don't know necessarily their ceiling, but
I don't think you know the negative.
They're not a bust, right?
Yeah, I think you don't know if they're a bust right away, but I think you can know obviously right away when they're really good. And I think the Cowboys, seemingly have hit on their first two picks this year. And I think, maybe part of that is just a change in how they're targeting these players, or maybe it was that they just got into a bad situation in the Mozzie Smith Schoonmaker draft where they were reaching for positions of need, and everyone knows you shouldn't necessarily, and I think that they paid the price for it, and so hopefully they've learned a lesson there a little bit. And look, they didn't necessarily trade for positional value in the first round, but they went and got the guy that they felt like was going to be a solid pick, and he's been that exactly.
Yeah, and my biggest gripe with the draft is, and we're going to talk about this next with Micah Parsons. If you knew you were trading Micah Parsons, do you draft differently? Do you draft an edge rusher in round 1, like someone like Jalen Walker, who I was a big fan of? He was available at pick 12. I think that's a little bit. Some of that is mitigated when you draft Donovan Ezeiruaku in round 2, because I think Walker's been a little bit better this year, but not enough to be like upset that because the Cowboys got Ezeiruaku. So I feel really good about their draft, even if the positional value isn't necessarily there in round 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can argue certainly positional value if those players are bust, right? But since they both hit, I think you feel like, man, it worked out, whether it was the right way to go or not. Ultimately, it's what they were looking for.
And we're obviously hoping Savon Ravel, who's expected to start, expected to play. That'd be awesome if you start. Expected to play against the Raiders on Monday Night Football. If he can give you anything, in the second half of the year, I think you're going to be feeling awesome about the Cowboys draft class. So overall, free agency in the draft, I mean, like if I was giving them a grade, like B+ at the very least. I mean, I really think this is the best combination of free agency and draft they've had in a long time.
I think we didn't really talk about this aspect of it, but the Javonte Williams surprise, how surprising it was for him to kind of take the brass ring and become the lead back and the sole back basically of this team. That's what was the most surprising, I think, and it really kind of took what was a good offseason into a very, very good as far as acquisition goes. Now, what's going out the door, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, because you never felt once like Javonte Williams isn't good enough at the running back position. In fact, you felt like he's actually adding value to the offense, and he's giving you a sense of physicality that we've been begging for years. So overall, well done by the Cowboys in free agency in the draft. But let's talk about where maybe they messed up this offseason. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, or both. There has never been a better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried Prize Picks yet, it's the simplest way to play. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere that Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I love that on Sundays, I can use Prize Picks for the NFL, and then during the middle of the week, we've got basketball action all week long. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. Nobody else is doing that right now. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We also like to thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Landon, let's talk about where the Cowboys got this offseason wrong. And then again, we thought for the most part they've had a good offseason. Where did they get it wrong now that we're 10 games through the season?
I mean, I don't know if anyone's heard about this, but right before the season started, the Cowboys traded Micah Parsons. They had Micah Parsons on their football team, and they traded him to another football team.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's it. And I think, look, I think one way that we can kind of approach this, or at least talk about this a little bit differently than we have previously, right, is, maybe the idea of if Micah Parsons a trade was inevitable, right, then maybe we should discuss the sin specifically of how it all went down, right? And the lack of just overall value that the Cowboys got for this obviously extremely valuable commodity. And it wasn't even, I mean, look, they got a lot for him. I mean, he got 2 first-round picks, but I think, and a player, right? And I think that's a lot, but I think when you're talking about what you're talking about with Micah Parsons, a kind of supremely unique player that's, changed the shape of their defense. I think if you had done this in a more timely fashion and let it be known a little bit more, given more teams the opportunity to prepare packages to kind of put together a trade package, because that's the thing too, is that, when you do a sudden trade, you're not giving the teams that may be interested in getting Parsons the opportunity to, gather the resources to make a pitch, right? They have much more opportunity earlier in the season, like maybe before the draft, or
if you're doing it in March, right? If you're doing
Yeah.
this trade in March, not only do they have the resources, but they also have the cap space. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of these teams got to once we got to September is they just didn't have the ability to fit him into their cap because they spent all that money during the offseason on free agents, trades, and current extensions.
Yeah, and look, we could talk about, we still haven't gotten all the results of this trade yet, all the players that have been acquired with the resources that were gotten from his trade, right? So I still kind of want to hold out like ultimate, 2020 vision looking back until this whole thing is done. But I think what we can still debate currently right now is the idea that because they executed it in such a haphazard manner, and because it was done seemingly out of kind of anger that the contract situation wasn't really going anywhere, it feels like the Cowboys really sold themselves short. More opportunity to get more, Jerry talked about getting 5 players out of this whole situation. If you had gotten more out of this trade, that could have been 6 or 7, and I think that's the part that's really kind of hard to look past. And even if you're the most diehard Jerry believer, it's hard to look past that they picked the absolute worst opportunity timing wise to do this, because not only what you missed out in trade value, but kind of going back to what we talked about in the last segment, the way that they sideswiped the defensive coordinator and completely changed the tenor and the approach of the defense, because you've lost the player that you're building this defense around. It affected not only the play caller, but all the players in the defense that had to kind of adjust their roles, including Fowler. Like we talked about, some players didn't take to it as well, like Sam Williams and some of the younger guys. So it had a major effect in all aspects of the defense, and none of it was positive, really.
And it wasn't fair to like Kenny Clark, who the Cowboys acquired again 5 days before they kicked off against Philadelphia. He just didn't have any time to get used to the scheme, the coaching staff, the players next to him. Even if you do this day one of training camp, at least Kenny Clark has a little bit more time, and maybe you get better results and you're not giving up 40 points to the Giants in week 2, right? There was the distraction of all this. And this was one of our biggest problems at the time is you don't need this distraction. I don't know why Jerry Jones feels the need to constantly have a distraction. People are going to talk about the Cowboys regardless. Instead, you had a preseason game where the number one story was Micah Parsons laying on the training camp table. And every day after practice, you had players being asked about Micah Parsons. And it was unnecessary. And I think the biggest thing was just a lack of planning. Like if you knew back in March when Jerry Jones and Micah sat down that when that deal didn't go through and that Jerry was never going to get to the number that, Micah wanted, trade him then, at least give yourself more options rather than having to pull the trigger that fast.
Well, and you said it. Look, I mean, everyone's going to talk about the Cowboys anyways, but they're not going to necessarily talk about Jerry Jones unless Jerry Jones causes a stink in every single offseason. So it's ironic that the final straw was Micah laying down on the table in the preseason game and causing a ruckus there, because Jerry's creating a ruckus at all times. Jerry's doing the equivalent of an owner lying down on a training table on a sideline of a preseason game by constantly making public these contentious contract situations. So yeah, the Cowboys have got to figure out a way to get Jerry to stop doing this. And I know it's tough to get Jerry to do anything, but they've got to come to reason here.
One more thing, and this is kind of directed or tied to the Micah Parsons thing, is they should have had a better plan at cornerback. And we're going to talk about Kaiir Elam in a second. You knew Trevon Diggs was going to be iffy for the start of the season. Now, he played in week 1, but I mean, Jerry Jones has basically said like he wasn't ready. Trevon wasn't ready. You had DaRon Bland, and then not a lot outside of that. If you traded Micah back in March, maybe before camp started, maybe you free up some money to keep a Jordan Lewis or to go out and sign, a defensive back. They just had way too much change in the secondary for one off season on top of losing your all-pro pass rusher.
Well, and if anything's a proof of the pudding situation for that this was an improv situation and not planned very well, is that the Cowboys didn't fortify the cornerback position before trading away their best pass rusher, right? Like the cornerback room was basically built with the idea that you have Micah Parsons on your defensive line, and that's why you have two guys that are interception kings, but not necessarily, great man-to-man coverage guys. So, again, this is not very well kind of holistically planned and feels pretty haphazard.
Well, and that's why for as great as offseason we think they had, like in, with free agency in the draft, one bad move or one ill-timed move like this can kind of torpedo everything else. And I think as the season goes on, I think the hope is maybe things start to stabilize a little bit. But nobody should be surprised at the way the first half of the season went after you traded away Micah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trading away Micah for an equivalent amount of talent spread out over several players, and you haven't even gotten those returns yet, obviously you're going to be a less talented team, right? Like, I mean, that's just kind of physics, like the energy's going this different way. So I just think that the Cowboys clearly did this, and they had to have known that they were punting the ball for another season, whether they're telling their fans that or not, just based on the tenor of the way everything was done. And honestly, it just feels like when the trade got made, it was Jerry kind of throwing his hands up for the season. I mean, I really, it's hard not to feel that way.
Let's talk about the trades. The Cowboys made several trades in the offseason, including the Micah Parsons one. They've already made 2 trades during the season. What should we take away from those trades? What have we learned? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium, surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It's all incredibly frustrating, but that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. you'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price that you see is the price that you pay. Game Time is the only app that I use when I buy tickets. My favorite feature in the app is that you can see your exact view from the seats before you buy. And honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that you can buy tickets. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That is promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go download Game Time today. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, let's talk about trades. The Cowboys are making more trades than in my lifetime, at least, probably back to the early Jimmy Johnson days. What have we learned from these trades?
Yeah, it feels like one of the things we've learned is that the Cowboys need to trade for they need to not be afraid to pay a premium to trade for sure things, right? Because I feel like where they've struggled at times is, one of the strategies they have for free agency, and Will McClay is famous for this, is going after like former first round picks and seeing if you can get something out of them that other teams.
Solomon Thomas, perfect example.
Yeah. Exactly. And there's tons of those examples and tons of them that work for the Cowboys as well. Like the Cowboys are actually good at this, but they aren't necessarily good at trading for these players. And it feels like the problem is that you're increasing the risk here. One of the best things about that is that it's a low risk, high reward situation. By tying draft picks, even, kind of day 2 or day 3 draft picks, you're still adding too much to it, to the risk side of it. And it's the reward is not, the hit rate isn't that great, and I think with someone like Kyler Murray specifically, it's like Kenneth Murray. I'm never going to not do it. I forgot. With Kenneth Murray specifically, when they traded for him, we all knew who Kenneth Murray was. He'd already been with 2 other teams. It's been very clear that how he had been playing and his style of play, and he hadn't really, improved on it. And lo and behold, he comes to the Cowboys, and guess what? He does the exact same thing. I just don't think the Cowboys are as good with these more advanced veterans trying to get extra juice out of them. And I think it's because they're playing a very simplistic defense. It's not like, you're playing some kind of specialty defense that's going to be able to highlight these guys differently. We're looking for pure talent guys that are able to get upfield and chase the quarterback. And if this guy has been in like 3 of those defenses already and hasn't, learned how to not chase play action at this point, I mean, we're using Murray as an example, but there's a lot of these. But I think it's not going to happen now.
Yeah, go through it from the start of the trade deadline last year. They traded a 4th-round pick for Jonathan Mingo. I mean, he's been nothing for you, right?
Yeah.
Now Carolina gave up on him after a year and a half because he wasn't what they were hoped, right? They traded for Kenneth Murray. Shout out to Kyler Murray, Call of Duty released today. I know. They traded for Kaiir Elam, who was a 1st-round pick that was benched in Buffalo in 2024. Elam has been, a rotational corner at this point.
I mean, you've needed him. That's why he's been thrown out there. But at the same time, in a desperate cornerback situation, it's not like he's out there all the time.
So all of those guys were essentially busts from the teams that previously drafted them. But go the other way. George Pickens was a Pro Bowl receiver for the Steelers. He got traded because of off-field stuff, not performance, right? That one has worked out incredibly well for Dallas. Go back even a couple more years. Brandon Cooks. I mean, the Cowboys traded a late-round pick for Brandon Cooks. Maybe he wasn't the number 2 receiver that you'd hoped, but nobody's going to say that was a bad trade for Dallas. The Cowboys absolutely won that trade. Same with Stephon Gilmore. He gave you Pro Bowl caliber cornerback play. Go all the way back to Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper saved your season and became an all-pro caliber receiver. All of those guys were established as good and sometimes great NFL players, and that translated to Dallas.
Yeah, and obviously you're hoping for that same sort of success with Quinnen as he comes in here and he gets his first opportunity. So, yeah, I think that the Cowboys need to be careful mixing their free agent and draft strategies, and maybe just kind of keep them separate as far as how they're selecting their targets.
If you're going to trade for somebody who is already good. I mean, because it's just you're giving
pay the premium.
Yeah, pay the premium for a young player for day 3 capital, which is what they've traded away for Milton, Murray, Elam. Don't do that. Don't trade for guys that are still on a rookie contract, because more often than not, those guys are available for a reason. You're better off buying a veteran on a 1-year deal like the Cowboys did with Michael Bennett or Stephon Gilmore. They've had so much more success doing that. The Pickens one is fascinating because the Pickens one, I really feel like that was a move that was aggressive at the time, but it's worked out.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the aggressiveness there was pushed by their need, and so
Yes.
I feels like it's hard to know if the Cowboys actually learned a lesson there, or if they're just looking at, oh man, we struck gold, we just lucked out. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that they look at that situation and go, man, our aggressiveness, it paid off. It's we're being rewarded for it, and they feel positively about it. So we'll see how the whole thing plays out, but I'm hoping that you see more of this kind of thing, because it's been one of the more successful ways that the Cowboys improved their roster so far.
Yeah, and one other thing from the offseason that we didn't have time to talk about is the extensions to Osa Odighizuwa, DaRon Bland, Jake Ferguson. Again, we're only 10 weeks to the season. I want to let those play out a little bit, but maybe that's a sign that you should maybe not so much invest in the middle part of your roster. But again, we can say that for another day.
Yeah, it's pretty early, but yeah, the returns so far have not necessarily been great on all 3 of those. I still have confidence in at least 2 of those 3 working out, hopefully.
Honestly, I have confidence that all 3 are going to be good players. And I think that's maybe they don't get back to the highs that they were when they got signed, but I think all those guys are going to be just fine. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we'll see you right back here on Monday to get you ready for Cowboys Raiders Monday Night Football.